The Switch has become something of a Nintendo apology tour. Breath of the Wild was an apology for the linearity of Skyward Sword, Mario Odyssey was an apology for not having a mainline Mario on the Wii U, Animal Crossing New Horizons is an apology for whatever these were, and Paper Mario the Origami King was an apology for Paper Mario games that people actually bought. Don't get me wrong, I know for some people this will be their very first Paper Mario game, so it's only fair that I attempt to judge it on its own merits. I have come up with at least a couple positive things to say about it. For instance, the aptly named turn-based combat is actually pretty refreshing and surprisingly enthralling. I thought spending the first part of my turn trying to line up enemies would be tedious, but after the game is done explaining it to death, and before you get sick of it by the end of the game, you find a real satisfaction in setting up your enemies in either a line or a 2x2 square in order to get a power boost on your attacks. It's the only mechanic in this whole game that is a true step forward for the Paper Mario series. See, in older titles, enemies would be in a two-dimensional line, and the amount of enemies in a row, their positions on the stage, or their number of hitboxes would determine what you would want to use to attack, whether you would want to use a single powerful hammer on a ground enemy, or if you wanted to deal out equal damage to several enemies in a line. For someone who enjoys a challenge, it's actually a bit exciting to see what kind of puzzles they throw your way, and at times I find myself needing a minute to figure out how to optimize my turns to get the most effective attacks. And at other times I can't really be bothered, so I give a toad some money to do it for me. But man, it is fun! And it is one of the only true innovations this series has seen in 16 years. It's unique, it's really well put together, and I can't say I've seen this done in any other game, which makes it that much more painful that the entire in-game economy and attack system are aggressively counterintuitive. There is no leveling up. You earn coins which are then used to buy attacks from the store that become increasingly powerful as you go through the game, and the ones you buy, just like Sticker Star, Color Splash, Breath of the Wild, or on the sides of your Switch, can be used like 5 times before you have to go out and buy them again. So now, since I already earned so many coins in battles that are mandatory and just through exploring the world, I have no reason at all to do any other battles. Luckily though, for our fellow enthusiasts of bad game design, battles are much more difficult to avoid because Dead Turtles run like Hector Bellerin and Sonic the Hedgehog shoes, and Mario trots along like he's on a Thorazine drip, so when you inevitably get sucked into a battle, you don't try to run away because frankly I'm pretty sure they added the flee button in as a joke, so you slug your way through battles you don't want to do, which wears down brutally on the fun you would have had with the battles that you do want to do. An adventure game with no substantial form of progression will never be as engaging as a game where I get to keep the moves I earn and then level up or gain more moves. In a world where I level up, I have incentive to go fight more battles and stay in the battles I get caught in. In Sticker Star and Color Splash, I get enough coins to get good attacks for the bosses and then run away from every other fight. And in this game, well, since you can use an attack 5 times instead of once, they bumped up the costs of attacks from 10 coins to 760 in what I think was a thinly veiled attempt to make players feel pressure to get more coins from battles. The whole battle system versus in-game economy spins so hard against the way that it drives. If they were so determined to not make an RPG, they might as well have taken battles out completely and called it Paper Mario 3D Worlds. Honestly, if you could equip and use items more closely to how Ocarina of Time does it, they probably could have just made this a fun adventure game and ended comparisons to the first couple Paper Mario games once and for all. My case for this is made because you already fight Paper Macho enemies and hit regular enemies with your hammer. You could easily map Fire Flowers to a button the way you would in Ocarina of Time, or equip the tail in the same way as like Mario 3 and tack on a more subtle version of Z targeting. They could have used that in more inventive ways to make combat not feel like a roadblock to all the things this game already offers. The game is loaded with puzzles, secret paths, collectibles, fun set pieces, not fun set pieces, roads to find, holes to fill. This genuinely had the opportunity to be a good Zelda-style action-adventure game. This whole section is basically Wind Waker. And when the game doesn't bog it down with bad pacing and the overzealous writing of side characters, which we'll get to, this game presents itself pretty well. Nintendo spent the better part of 15 years squeezing substantive, vibrant, technically impressive graphics out of anemic hardware, and Origami King is certainly no exception. Every area is packed with life, almost everything has incredibly detailed textures, and look at this water. Why is Nintendo so good at impossibly realistic water? Seriously, wait till 2072 when Nintendo comes out with a system that's as powerful as a 2018 gaming PC. We won't be able to distinguish Super Mario from real life.
Where'd you get those? Where are you going? Wait!
The series has always been building on its crafted look, and this is probably the best implementation of it. Little ideas like random origami objects unfolding into toads and fortune teller traps in the origami castle are some of the more clever logical extremes for its paper motif. Office supplies as enemies happen to be in the opposite end with the dumbest logical extremes, but we'll get to that later. And people say this is a bad thing, but the whole game is kind of a hodgepodge of almost mini-game ideas. You're doing puzzles over here, now you're shooting down planes, now you're diving in a submarine like Labo VR, now it's a memory test, and there's a matchmaking game, and honestly, it's just kind of dumb fun. Most of them never really outstay their welcome, and it's a nice switch up from just solving puzzles and slamming the B button through miles of script. The only part of it that doesn't sit well with me is I can't help but get the feeling that it's a thinly veiled attempt at making memorable moments. And speaking of which, Kensuke Tanabe, one of the main producers of the Paper Mario series, said he believes memorable moments are made when partner characters are exclusive to certain areas, which is an idea that I fundamentally disagree with. Take Spyro 2 and 3 for example. In Spyro 2, the world feels engaging and interconnected because every level has a sister level. Badlands and Crystal Glacier are fire and ice analogs of each other themed around cavemen. Breeze Harbor and Zephyr have the enemies of their respective worlds being the NPCs of the other. Idle Springs is at the base of the Mountains of Colossus. It goes on. And it's simple. But in seeing original yet recurring themes throughout the game, you get the feeling of a sprawling, diverse yet interconnected world. Spyro 3 saw the characters from each of its wildly different levels coming together for a common goal. You've gone into their worlds to help them, and now they've come out to create a balloon or whatever to help you progress to the next area. Older Paper Mario titles had this as well with the partner system, in which side characters who are visually distinct from the new areas that you visit will join your party and grant you new abilities, while also reminding you of your journey so far. A well-educated Goomba from a slummy town, an explosive pirate mourning the death of his wife who teams up with you to take revenge on a giant skeleton, a ghost with an inferiority complex when you save her from her sisters who abandoned her. Sometimes they're loosely themed after staple Mario characters, and sometimes they're entirely new designs, but they're impactful and memorable, and they're always going to be intrinsically better than...
Hey! Listen!
Oh my god, is that Navi?
Hey! Listen!
I love Navi!
Hey, listen!
Don't let me discover any game mechanics on my own. I'm not necessarily saying this game is bad for not having partner characters, but I am saying this bitch makes the game much worse.
Oh, calm down, Jamal. Don't pull out the 9.
Sometimes Olivia sits down with you on a park bench and offers up tight, impactful, sometimes even comforting dialogue about the things that are happening or that have happened in the game. And those are the moments that perfectly make the case for Paper Navi being a viable alternative. But that is so few and far between compared to... She never stops yapping for jokes that rarely land, and every character over-explains every basic function of every moment in the entire game. Can I do a single battle, or go to a single area, without having every answer to every puzzle explained to me? Can I put 2 and 2 together once? Ever? Partner characters will constantly explain every last element of where to go and what to do, and when you dare to veer off course, they rip you back on track like a Call of Duty set piece.
Stop looking! Ice forward! Ice forward! Stop looking! Stop looking! Stop looking! Ice forward! Ice forward!
So you don't get lost down all 2 1/2 meters of diverging paths with dead ends in unbridled linearity that makes a Call of Duty campaign look like a hedge maze. I had more trouble finding this tower because I thought this was a fence instead of a gate than I did solving any single puzzle or finishing any fight in the entire game. I understand this game has an audience that extends to age groups beyond man baby, but I'm pretty sure if any Pokemon playing 7-year-old can figure out this, they can probably figure out this. When you wade through the aggressively overwritten moments, the game occasionally sticks the landing on some jokes. Not a lot of jokes, but some jokes. The coffee shop scenes were consistently amusing, there was a sex joke, and there's some moments near the beginning that are a lot more clever in the context of the full game. For instance, the beginning of the first temple, with context that this is a sacred temple of the Earth Valuemental, a sort of god figure to the Koopas, has been turned into a shady tourist trap in which a sleazy toad makes up tidbits about a random rock being indestructible and therefore holy, and a random ridge being left in its its quote-unquote historically accurate state. This in and of itself is relatively amusing, but it kind of rolls off of you at first. Then, throughout the game, you're slowly dripped with the context that one of the last areas, Shangri Spa, is sort of a religious holy land, of which you can only enter by going under the Great Sea and passing 3 trials, which necessitated the building of an ancient submarine that ended up being stolen by minor character Captain Teody in order to search for treasure, with which he tried to trade with a pharaoh type by the name of King Shroomsies, who, loyal to Shangri Spa, looked to take revenge on Captain Teody, prompting him to go into hiding and freezing himself. The 4 Valumentals are sort of the godly figures that guard the entrance to the Grand Shangri Spa, and as such, it's become a place of cultural and religious significance for the Toads, which goes back to the beginning of the game in which the sleazy Toad has turned the site of grandeur and holiness into a tourist trap. That was a long way to go for an example, but it's some weirdly deep lore capped off with a dry and poignant joke, and it's the kind of subtle writing with long-term payoffs that I kind of wish there was more of, especially since this was marketed as a comedy game. And of course, comedic value is a matter of perspective. Some people like Angry Joe.
Literally designed for you to flail your arms around like a idiot.
But the writing all around is the consistency of expired milk. Without spoiling anything, there were some mature themes that were tackled at one point in the game with Bob-omb's story arc.
Ambrosia.
The part that every other reviewer seems to be ceaselessly praising, where things were built up early on and paid off pretty successfully several hours later within that part of the story. It led to a pretty heavy moment, and probably the only instance in the game where Olivia shuts up long enough to show genuine, impactful emotion. It was kinda shallow, it kinda got glossed over, but for my money, it worked. Conversely, at the end of the game, and again without really spoiling anything, they try to use Olivia in a thinly veiled attempt to drum up more emotion by sort of listing off all the things you did right before something really major happens. And it probably could have worked, but she literally just lists off levels and characters to the point where it breaks the tension, because you realize a group of scriptwriters wrote Olivia emotional recap on some whiteboard in some office. It'd be like if in Final Fantasy VII, right as you're in front of Sephiroth, Barrett stops everyone to say, "Hey, remember Sector 1, Sector 8, Sector 7, Sector 4, Sector 5, Sector 6, Sector 0, Midgar Wasteland, Calm,
North
Chocobo
Pole,
Farm,
Wonder
Marshes,
Square,
Mithril
Battle
Mine,
Square,
Mithril
Chocobo
Mine,
Square,
Fort
Fort
Condor,
Square,
Underdrift,
Nibelheim.
And I know it's kind of redundant to complain about the overuse of paper when it's in the title, but what was once thematically a storybook meets Broadway play has been replaced with your dad's cubicle office supplies and 8 years of wacky jokes about paper. A series once brimming with new characters, locales, and situations has completely been replaced with I've been saying the phrase thinly veiled a lot in this review, and it's a pretty good description of the Origami King. It's thin, hollow, devoid of substance. Intelligent Systems wanted to make a semi-comedic book, and instead they made another game in a series they're bored of. You see it in developer interviews. Some of these people have been making Paper Mario since Super Mario RPG, and it shows. They're bored of Paper Mario. They don't want to make Paper Mario. They want to make Zelda. They want to make Brain Age. They want to make a semi-comedic Tumblr blog that's only funny to 15-year-old girls with short pink hair.
If you don't kiss her cat on their tiny, soft little forehead, what the fuck are you even doing?
They have content for Paper Mario because it's not a series they like to work on. It's a series Nintendo has forced them to work on. I started writing this review before the game was even out. I finished this review before I cut the third ribbon. And because I really wanted to like the Origami King, I finished the game anyway to see if my review would lighten up, even a little. And it didn't. It just gave me more examples to illustrate what I already hated about it. People keep saying this game is a step forward for the Paper Mario series, but it's not. It's a step in place. It combines everything you hate about Sticker Star and Color Splash, but it does it in a more palatable way to make it feel like it's doing something different. It's a confirmation that the series will never go back to the ideas and stories that made us fall in love with it, and a confirmation that the series is too scared to truly carve out a new identity.
Final verdict?
I knew I wasn't gonna like this.